Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because we're about to plunge into some truly mind-bending territory today.
We really are. We're looking at an alternative, pretty esoteric perspective on Earth's earliest beginnings.
And timelines that make our usual understanding of history feel, well, incredibly small.
Our source material for this deep dive is H.P. Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, Volume 2. Specifically, we're digging into Stanza 2, which has this provocative title, Nature Unaided Fails.
Right. So our mission here is to try and unpack this dense stuff.
Yeah.
We'll explore its, let's say, startling claims, bizarre early life forms.
Yeah, really strange, Rob.
The role of conscious intelligences in creation and this ancient chronology that's just huge, billions, even trillions of years.
We want to see what secrets, what insights about nature, consciousness, and time might be locked away in these traditions, according to this particular source, of course.
Okay, let's dive in. Where does the source start this story?
It takes us way, way back, after vast cosmic ages, apparently. The idea is that physical nature here on Earth trying to create life.
On its own.
Exactly. Unaided by any higher consciousness, any guiding intelligence, just raw physical forces at work.
Okay, so Nature Solo Project.
Right.
And how long did this supposedly go on for?
The source gives a specific number, 30 crores, which translates to 300 million years.
300 million years
Yeah.
of just unsupervised creation.
Pretty much. And the results, as described in the text, were, well, they're called monstrous and unviable forms.
A monstrous how? What kind of things are we talking about?
It gives some pretty vivid examples. Things like watermen terrible and bad, men with wings, four-faced men, two-faced men,
Wow.
human beings with two heads, goat legs and horns, hippocentaurs, half man, half horse, even bulls with human heads and dogs with fishtails.
Okay, that's quite a list. It sounds like something out of mythology, not biology.
Exactly. A chaotic mix of animal and human features. And the core idea here isn't just that they were weird, but that they failed.
Failed how?
They were fundamentally flawed because they lacked that guiding principle of consciousness. They were senseless shells, the text says. Physical matter left to its own devices couldn't produce viable, intelligent life.
And is this idea unique to Blavatsky's system? Or does the source see it elsewhere?
No, it definitely points to parallels. It mentions Chaldean cosmogony, for instance. Writers like Berosus supposedly described similar hideous beings coming out of primordial chaos, the primordial waters.
Interesting. So other ancient traditions might have had similar ideas about a sort of rough draft of creation.
That's the connection being made, yeah. It also brings up the Zohar and Midrash, talking about God creating and destroying worlds before this one, and even Chaldean inscriptions hinting at a first failed creation.
And you mentioned Chinese sources, too.
Right, the Shanhai king. Apparently, engravings attributed to Emperor Yu depicted things like two-faced men and goat-bodied creatures with human faces. So this narrative seems to pop up in various places, according to the source.
But the key point is this failure wasn't about being evil or bad. Right?
Correct. Not a moral failure. They were just senseless, lacking the connection to what the source calls Mahat, the universal mind, and lacking the guidance of conscious agents who could build according to a proper plan.
The source even tries to link this to modern times, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Pointing to biological anomalies.
It does, yeah. It mentions what it calls monster specimens, things like two-headed animals or babies born with unusual features. The argument is, well, if these rare deviations occur now, maybe such forms were the norm, even a law, back in the earliest, most chaotic stages before life settled down.
And how does this tie into human evolution specifically?
It uses a point from a naturalist, Minard de Quatrefages, who apparently noted how stable the human physical form has been for a very long time, geologically speaking, compared to other animals.
Okay.
And the source uses this to argue that humans aren't just another step in purely physical evolution. It suggests we belong to a distinct kingdom guided by higher principles from the start, that our form wasn't just shaped by random physical forces alone.
So a much earlier influence of something. More than just matter.
That's the picture it paints, yes.
Okay, so Nature's solo attempt runs for 300 million years, produces these unsuitable, senseless forms. What shifts? What happens next?
Well, this is where the higher intelligences come in. The next stage begins with the arrival of the Dhyani, or Dhyan Chohans.
The divine creators, or builders, as they're often called in this system.
Precisely. They are said to originate from the bright father-mother, which represents primordial spirit matter. They're described as a whole hierarchy of conscious, intelligent beings.
And what's their reaction to nature's handiwork?
They look at these monstrous forms, and the text says they were displeased.
Just displeased.
Well, it quotes them directly. Our flesh is not there. This is no fit rupa for our brothers of the fifth, no dwellings for the lives, pure waters, not turbid, they must drink.
No fit rupa, no suitable form. So it's not just that they didn't like the look of them.
No, it's fundamental. The forms were soulless shells. They were incapable of housing the monads.
The monads being the core spirit soul.
Yeah.
Amabudi.
Yes, that highest spiritual spark. This brings in that key theosophical idea of our complex septenary constitution, 7 layers of principles.
Right.
And the source says the monad, this highest bit, can't just connect directly to a purely physical body like those early forms.
Need something in between.
A bridge. Exactly. It needs an agent of transmission. And that agent is manas, the principle of mind, the thinking, self-conscious part of us. Those early forms were no-fit dwellings because they lacked the potential, the necessary structure, for manas, the brothers of the fifth, as the quote calls them, to incarnate and actually use the body for conscious life.
So evolution, in this view, isn't just about physical survival. It's about developing bodies that can actually host consciousness.
That's the essence of it, yeah. The body needs to become compatible with these higher principles.
And again, the source draws parallels to other traditions, like the Puranas.
It does. It links this to the story of Brahma's creation starting in darkness, then producing different beings. The Asuras first, then Devas, Pitras, and finally humans.
But Asuras are usually seen as, well, demons or anti-gods, aren't they?
In popular Hinduism, often yes. But the source gives an esoteric reading. Here, the Asuras represent the active, self-asserting, intellectual principle.
Ah, so not inherently bad.
No, they're seen as the necessary positive pole of creation, the dynamic, active intelligence needed for thought and development. That's why they're produced. First, they represent that initial push of mind.
And this connects somehow to the idea of the fall, like the biblical fall.
Exactly. The source argues that later traditions, especially Christian theology influenced by Babylonian and Pharisee ideas, kind of distorted the original meaning.
How so?
It claims Chaldean tablets actually describe these so-called evil gods or rebellious angels simply as beings associated with the lower part of heaven, meaning a more material plane.
So the fall isn't about sinning against God, but more about consciousness descending into matter.
That's the esoteric interpretation presented. The fall symbolizes the necessary descent of self-conscious mind, the asuras, the rebels, into the inertia of physical matter. It's seen as crucial for developing thinking humanity, even though it involves spirit getting temporarily stuck or limited by matter.
Okay, so the Dhyani arrive, they're displeased with the soulless monsters. What do they actually do about it?
Well, they take action. The source puts it quite bluntly. They slew the forms.
Fought them. The goat men and the dog-headed men.
That's the imagery, yes. A kind of cosmic cleanup operation.
Yeah.
And it's described using elemental symbolism.
Like what?
The flames came, the fires with the sparks, the night fires and the day fires. They dried out the turbid dark waters. With their heat, they quenched them.
Flames and fires versus waters. So spirit versus matter.
That seems to be the symbolism, the active, purifying principle of spirit, flames, fires, overcoming the chaotic, passive, unformed state of matter, turbid dark waters, a necessary struggle and purification.
Are specific groups of these beings mentioned?
Yeah, it mentions different hierarchies involved. The laws, spirits of the high, the lamain, those of below, suggesting a coordinated effort across different spiritual levels.
And did this cosmic battle have physical consequences for Earth itself?
Apparently so. The text says, Mother Water, the great sea wept. She arose, she disappeared in the moon, which had lifted her, which had given her birth.
Wait, disappeared in the moon, which gave Earth birth. That sounds backwards to the usual scientific story.
It absolutely is. This is one of the really controversial points in the source material. It explicitly states the occult teaching is the reverse of the idea that the moon came from the Earth.
So the moon is older, and Earth somehow came from the moon's sphere of influence, or a previous lunar chain.
That's the idea presented, yes.
Yeah.
Earth owes its being to this prior, now defunct lunar existence. And the tides in this view aren't just gravity. They're seen as symbolic, like Earth's fluidic essence, its water, still striving towards its parent, the moon, reaching back to its mother.
That is a very different perspective on tides.
Wow. It definitely is. So the outcome of all this purification is The monstrous forms are gone, the chaotic waters are controlled, and the earth is left bare, asking to be dried.
Ready for the next stage.
Exactly. Ready for proper organization and the beginning of viable life, which will be guided by the sons of wisdom. The source also briefly touches on the idea that solid matter itself arises from the interaction of water, female passive, and fire, male active, energized by fohat,
Forehat being.
cosmic electricity, or life force, the animating power.
Okay, this whole process, especially that first 300 million year phase, the timescales are just immense. How does the source claim anyone, especially ancients, could know about these kinds of durations?
Well, the claim is it wasn't guesswork. It was based on knowledge preserved in secret cycles and calculations, things encoded in their zodiacs and sacred calendars, guarded by initiated Brahmins.
So secret knowledge passed down.
That's the assertion. And it contrasts this with the scientific estimates of Earth's age back in the late 1800s, which are often conflicting and much, much smaller.
Does it mention any specific source for this chronology?
It names a figure called Asramaya, described as a great astronomer, maybe an adept, supposedly from Atlantis.
Atlantis, okay.
Yeah. And he is said to have compiled some of the secret data into texts like the Tamil Tirukanda Panchanga, drawing on records from a lineage that supposedly never died out.
So based on these alleged ancient secret sources, what kind of specific timelines are we talking about?
They are truly staggering. For instance, from the very beginning of cosmic evolution up to 1887 when the book was being written, the calculation given is around 1.956 billion years.
Almost 2 billion years just to get to the late 19th century.
Yep. And that initial 300 million years we talked about, that was for the astral kingdoms evolving before physical man appeared on this globe.
And when did humanity itself first appear, according to this?
The first appearance of the human principle across the whole planetary chain, not just on Earth, is placed way back, around 1.665 billion years ago.
Okay, my head is spinning slightly. What about our current human period here on Earth?
That's considered the fourth round on this globe, within what's called the Vaivasvata Manvantara. And according to the source's calculations, this period began about 18.6 million years before 1887.
18.6 million years.
Yeah.
Still vastly longer than conventional history allows for human civilization. How do these numbers relate to the Hindu yugas?
The source explains the standard Brahminical system, the Krita Yuga, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali Yuga.
Right, the 4 ages.
And they add up to one Mahayuga, a great age, which is 4,320,000 years long.
Okay.
But that's just one unit. These Mahayugas build into larger cycles. 71 of them make up the reign of one Manu.
And then
14 Manu cycles plus intervals make up one Kalpa, or a day of Brahma. That's 4.32 billion years.
a day of Brahma is over 4 billion years.
Yes, and a full day and night of Brahma is double that, 8.64 billion years. And then you get the entire lifespan of a cosmos, the Mahakalpa, or 100 years of Brahma, which comes out to over 311 trillion years.
311 trillion. It's almost impossible to grasp numbers that large. Is there a significance to the pattern of 4320?
The source argues yes. It sees the repetition of 4, 3, 2, and their multiples, like 432,000, not as random, but as symbolic keys. They reveal, supposedly, an intelligent mathematical plan behind the whole unfolding of the cosmos, like a divine blueprint.
So where do we fit into this massive cosmic clock right now?
According to this system, we're currently in the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age.
The bottom of the cycle.
Pretty much, yeah. Seen as a spiritually darker, more material transitional period.
The source links this to Plato as well, doesn't it?
It does. It calls Plato an initiate and says he also spoke about cycles, alternating between fertile spiritual times and barren material ones. And we're supposedly in a barren one now where spiritual insight is difficult, blinded.
And Blavatsky, writing in the late 1800s, felt this strongly.
Oh, yes. She lamented what she saw as a malignant fever of skepticism and rampant materialism cutting people off from spiritual belief. Her argument was that in such an age, philosophy is dominated by the animal brain, meaning the lower mind, kama manas, focused only on material concerns and desires, completely divorced from the higher spiritual soul, the buddhi manas.
So if the mind is only operating on that lower material level,
Then how, the source asks pointedly, can it possibly understand the soul doctrine? How can it grasp the deeper spiritual realities underlying the physical world? It's presented as a fundamental limitation of purely materialist thinking.
wow, okay. We have covered a lot of ground here. We've really delved into this alternative worldview, Earth's creation, involving, well, failed prototypes, divine intervention, cosmic battles, and these absolutely immense cycles of time.
Yeah, it's a very different picture from the standard narrative. The key takeaways really are this idea of preparatory monstrous forms that failed because they lacked consciousness.
The idea that consciousness, manas, is crucial and needs a properly developed physical vehicle.
The cyclical nature of everything, purification and creation driven by this interplay of spirit and matter.
And of course, this completely different scale of time rooted in these ancient, complex, and admittedly esoteric calculations.
It really forces you to consider that central conflict presented. Is evolution purely physical and random, or is it guided by higher intelligences according to some vast plan?
And it challenges us, doesn't it? Suggesting that maybe our current, very materially focused age, this Kali Yuga, makes it harder to even perceive or consider these other possibilities.
Exactly. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. If you entertain this esoteric view of time, just for a moment, these vast cycles, our current position in a dark age, how might that change your perspective on today? On the problems we face, or even on what counts as real knowledge? What might we be missing, as the source suggests, if we rely only on the animal brain to understand the universe?